for today's COP. On behalf of the entire team, we want to give you a warm welcome as we dive into today's topic, Crossroads of Prevention and Recovery. Now, this COP is sponsored and facilitated by the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services in partnership with the New Hampshire Technical Assistance Center, also known as Growth Partners. We're really excited to have you all here. As you can see on the slide, this community of practice will demonstrate how prevention can best work in tandem with recovery, provide resources and tools related to prevention and recovery, equip participants with strategies to effectively engage and collaborate with the recovery community, and increase understanding of Recovery Month. But before we dive into the content, we just want to go over a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded. As you may notice, the red dot that is blinking on top of your screen. So we ask that you keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking to help minimize the background noise. If you'd like to maintain privacy, feel free to turn off your video, but you're also welcome to keep it on. We love to see your faces. If you experience any technical difficulties like with your audio, as you can see on the slide, you can choose a different microphone or speaker. And if you have any issues with the bandwidth, you can choose to turn off your video, as that usually helps with the connection. We encourage active participation. Feel free to use the chat, share reactions, or engage with the Zoom tools during today's session. Your input is valued and helps enrich the conversation. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Candace, who will introduce the speakers and get the discussion going.
Hi, everybody. Do we have a slide for our speakers, Danny? All right. So just to give a little background about the COP that you're going to see today, we had a planning meeting, and one of our preventionists mentioned that it was Recovery Week and had a lot of interest in learning about how recovery and prevention can work together, because we know we're all along the continuum, and a lot of the folks that we support across the continuum all work together. And so that is how we came up with this idea. And a quick little plug, our planning committee is always looking for new people to join us. So if you're interested, shoot me an email afterwards and we can chat more about it. But Erica Gilbert is going to be our first presenter, and I'm going to read you a quick bio so you know a little bit about her. She's a CRSWS and the Family Support Coordinator at Navigating Recovery of the Lakes region. Erica has been working with individuals and families affected by substance use for over 4.5 years. Erica facilitates Parenting Journey in Recovery, Parenting Journey 2, and Nurturing Families in Recovery. Erica is a 2023 graduate of Building Futures Together, a program of UNH specializing in childhood development, family systems, and care coordination. As a person and mother in recovery, Erica acknowledges the health and well-being of children and families are the responsibility of all stakeholders in the community. Erica has 2 children, ages 13 and 11, and a dog named Jada. Erica is a huge football fan and enjoys playing sports whenever she can. Are we going to do Heidi now, or do you want to do that before her? Okay, I'm going to introduce Heidi as well. This is Heidi Cloutier. She is the co-director of training at UNH, and is going to be presenting on some of the really fantastic programs they have over there. And I'm going to read her bio as well. Heidi has extensive experience working with underestimated communities, behavioral health providers, and youth leadership and development. She is passionate about social justice, equity, and inclusion, and recognizing and honoring each person's strength to improve the lives of youth and families. Heidi coordinated a statewide effort to develop the New Hampshire Alternative Peer Group Model, APG, convening individuals and families with lived experience with substance use disorder, policymakers, and treatment providers to define the APG model implemented in New Hampshire, has developed evaluation tools and provided coaching to support 6 organizations implementing the 12 APGs in New Hampshire, in addition to the first collegiate recovery program in New Hampshire. She is an endorsed multi-tiered system of support trainer with the Northeast Positive Behavior Intervention and Support Network, and presents nationally on multi-tiered systems of support, behavioral health, and youth leadership. As a sophomore in high school, Heidi was trained as a peer leader to recognize warning signs of suicide, and the following year became facilitating groups with at-risk youth at her local middle school. This began a lifelong passion for youth leadership, wellness, and a commitment to equity and belonging for all. She worked in community mental health before joining the Institute on Disability in 1999, where she had worked in various initiatives that promoted inclusion, recognizing and honoring each person's strength and working to improve the lives of youth and families. In her current role as the co-director of training for the Children's System of Care Resource Center at the University of New Hampshire Institute on Disability, she collaborates with state partners to prepare and support the behavioral health workforce to provide the best possible supports to New Hampshire youth and families. Thank you both for joining us today. And we're going to jump right in and start with Erica.
All right, guys. Hi. Thanks for having me. Today we're going to talk about recovery supports and prevention and how they work together. I'm going to talk a little bit about, all about navigating recovery and the youth support services that we do here. I am going to introduce myself and touch briefly on my own recovery story. I am somebody in recovery. I have 6.5 years sober. I started using drugs and alcohol when I was about 13. Started with smoking cigarettes, smoking marijuana, then came the alcohol. My whole friend group began to change, and things that were important to me, like playing sports, weren't so important to me anymore. My addiction progressed to pills, specifically painkillers. I had 2 children by the time I was 21, and at this time I still had no intervention or recovery supports in place. My children did eventually get placed with family as my addiction really started to spiral. I ended up having some legal intervention as I was caught with some drug paraphernalia. That intervention started my recovery journey. I was placed in a first-time offender program. It was a diversion program. It still really wasn't all uphill from there. I still struggled. I ended up homeless and in and out of the hospital due to my addiction. And then I entered a year-long at-home or community-based treatment called Aware Recovery Care. It is through that program that I really started to live a life of recovery. I met my 2 recovery coaches, which really changed my life and my outlook on recovery, and really began my passion for wanting to give back to my community as well. During my first year of recovery, I started working full-time and was a manager at a local restaurant. I got my own apartment. I got my 2 children back. And then I knew I wanted more. I wanted to give back, and how recovery supports really played a huge role in my journey. I entered into a service agreement with AmeriCorps Recovery Corps program, and I did my service work at my host site was Navigating Recovery, and I was eventually hired there, and I still am here today. So that goes to show how much I love it. Over the past 4.5 years here, my role has grown. I became certified through the state of New Hampshire for a recovery support worker. I'm a peer supervisor now. I, like in my bio mentioned, in 2023, graduated the Building Futures Together program, which specializes in enhanced care coordination to children, adolescents, and transitional age youth who are at risk for behavioral health disorders. That is just a little snapshot of my story, but I just wanted to highlight where I started over 6.5 years ago, as I felt that the lived experience piece is so important in the work that we all do. Next slide, please. So Navigating Recovery of the Lakes region offers a wide range of programs designed to support individuals and families affected by substance misuse. Some of the services that we provide is free peer coaching, youth support, school peer support groups, mutual aid meetings. We go into the Belknap County Jail and offer recovery supports there as well. We are a part of a local women's sober living house. We co-facilitate with our local family resource center, parent education, and recovery support groups. But today I really wanted to focus on our youth support program and highlight that collaborating with various prevention efforts and organizations in our area, we've been able to make our youth program more robust and effective. These partnerships have been crucial in providing comprehensive support and resources to the young people we serve, ensuring that they have the best chance at recovery and a brighter future. Next slide. So recovery is, right? Recovery looks different for every person. There's not one way to recover. There's not a right way or a wrong way. There are multiple pathways to recovery, and those pathways can change over time as the individual's needs change. Just to name a few, some of the recovery pathways can include recovery support, peer support groups, exercise, 12-step meetings, medication-assisted treatment, harm reduction. Maybe somebody's not ready to give up the substances quite yet, but how can they do it in a safer way, right? So there's all different pathways to recovery. It's a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go over some of my roles as a recovery coach. We are a motivator and a cheerleader. We believe in the capacity for change, an ally. We actively listen. We're stable and consistent. We show up. We are a truth teller. We provide honest and helpful information. We offer suggestions and help to identify patterns of behavior. We do not sugarcoat things, but we are still kind. We are a role model. We offer our own life as an example of healthy living. You know the saying, we walk the talk. And we also provide stage-appropriate recovery information. We are a problem solver. We are going to try to identify some potential problem areas and assist them with problem solving. We're not going to tell them the right way, but help them discover options. A resource broker. Here at our recovery community organization, we are connected with a lot of resources here in the community, and we're going to try to provide a linkage for that participant to other community partners to get them connected and the help that they need. We are an advocate. We are an advocate for the recovery community. That's a big A. Little a advocate. We're advocating for the recovery, assisting them with protecting their rights, and act as a representative for them when requested. Maybe they need support making a phone call, helping to set up an appointment or a ride. We're going to help them with that. A community organizer. We're going to help them to establish a support network. And a lifestyle consultant, offer feedback on their lifestyle, maybe ask questions like, how's that working for you? And we're going to focus on recovery and wellness and discuss healthy choices. And lastly, a friend and companion. We try to be an equal peer-to-peer and do our best to reduce power differential. Next slide, please. So I put this slide up, staying in our lane as a peer support coach. I think maybe sometimes people might get confused on maybe what is a counselor, what is a coach, MLADAC, treatment. So recovery support services are non-clinical services, although recovery supports can be embedded into clinical settings. So it can kind of get a little confusing, but recovery support services are non-clinical that assist individuals and families working towards recovery from substance use disorders. We're going to instill hope, promote positive self-identity. Like I mentioned earlier, be a role model. We're going to try to promote connection and decrease isolation. And we're going to learn from each other, right? I learn from them as much as they learn from me. And like, we may include different social supports, like I mentioned earlier, and linkage to other service providers. Recovery support services are provided by professional and peers delivered through various community and faith-based groups, treatment providers, and recovery community organizations. And then sometimes people think recovery support services may be viewed as like post-treatment, like after they get sober, but recovery support services can be offered in the whole continuum of care, before, during, or even in lieu of treatment. And so this approach really is inclusive to pre-treatment and anywhere we meet anybody where they're at. Next slide, please. In talking about my story earlier and just trying to highlight I feel like the importance of lived experience in the work that we do. Having lived experience with substance misuse can be incredibly beneficial when working with anybody, specifically youth facing similar challenges. Peer support from someone who has walked in a similar path can provide a unique form of validation, letting young people know that they are not alone in their struggles. This shared experience fosters a sense of connection and trust, which is crucial for practical support. Moreover, individuals with lived experience can model resilience and demonstrate that recovery is possible, offering hope and inspiration. All right, next slide, please. And today I'm really wanted to highlight the connections and partnering with different prevention efforts. Partnering with prevention efforts like the Laconia Youth Alliance offers significant benefits, especially when it comes to serving our communities more effectively. A good amount of our youth referrals here at Navigating come directly from the relationships and connections built through that alliance. These partnerships create a network of support that enhances our ability to reach and assist more young people. By working together, we can pool our resources, share our expertise, and implement comprehensive strategies that address the root causes of issues that are facing our youth. This collaborative approach not only strengthens our impact, but also fosters a sense of community and shared responsibility, ultimately leading to more positive outcomes for the young people that we serve. Next slide, please. And then this is just a little data piece, what we're seeing here at Navigating Recovery, always trying to get more data on the youth that we serve. So 75% of the participants we see here at Navigating and our school groups, 75% of them identify as part of the LGBTQ+ community. About half of them are actively using substances, and the other half are seeking supports due to family systems impact. Maybe their mom or dad are in active use. Maybe they have a parent or caregiver that's locked up in jail. Maybe they have a family member who's early in recovery, and they're really just repairing that relationship with the child. Maybe the child just moved back home with the caretaker, or they're living with an extended family member like an aunt, uncle, or grandparent. And so I just wanted to share that just so you could get a little snapshot. Next slide, please. Working with youth can be a little bit more different than working with an adult seeking services when we're trying to understand the family system and the ripple effect. And in this picture here, you see a picture of a bathroom and all the pipes going from the toilet, the sink, and the tub, and how everything has to work just so in order for things to work properly. And then if we think about the ripple effect, and we think about a dad who loses their job, mom and dad start fighting constantly. Dad is now drinking alcohol to intoxication every night. The child starts getting depressed. Child is now starting fights in school and gets suspended. Now the school and the parents are starting to identify the child's behavior as the problem. And really, there's been a whole lot of stuff going on before the child was exhibiting these issues or getting in fights at school. By understanding the family system and the ripple effect, we can look upstream. This child did not get here by themselves. And just thinking about how prevention and recovery supports could help this family. Lots of different intervention points and points of contact that could really support this family, the whole family as a whole, to make sure they're getting the support and services that they need. Next slide, please. I wanted to show you a case example of a recovery wellness plan that we use here at Navigating Recovery. We always talk about where we meet people where they're at, which is true. This is their plan, and in order for them to be successful, they have to come up with it themselves. Just like you or I, it's going to be much easier to come up with a plan that we made than if somebody made it up for us. More recently, my coworker and I were at a training, and I heard something that really stood out to me. Somebody said, let's meet them, instead of meeting them where they're at, let's meet them where their dreams start. And I really liked that, and it stuck with me. And it felt good knowing that one of the first questions we ask on our recovery, in our intake and our recovery wellness plan, is we ask them what are their hopes and dreams. And so this is just a case example. I'm going to read to you a little bit about. I made up a name here, but so Sarah, she's a junior in high school and lives alone with her mom. She reports a rocky relationship with her dad and does not identify him as a supportive person. Sarah reports using marijuana and alcohol occasionally, although she states that she and her friends have been drinking more on the weekends. Sarah reports that her mom is supportive in some ways, but shared that her mom has made it challenging for her to be successful in the past. specifically when it comes to bringing her to appointments and to school. Sarah shared that she is chronically late to school every day. She lives just far enough or just close enough that a bus doesn't come, but far enough where the walk at 6:30 in the morning is pretty long. And right now, or she was looking at not being able to attend prom because she's been chronically late. She's failing her first class for missing work and more recently missing a big test. And so when talking to her and hearing her story, and I'm reading that little snapshot is, I think, my second session with her. And when you look at all of these things, her goal really isn't right to stop drinking or smoking right now. She's talking about it. Her goal is to be able to attend prom. And she's going to talk to her teacher and ask if she can make up the test she missed. And she's going to share a little either with her teacher that she trusts or a counselor about what's kind of going on at home and why she's always late. And mom reports to be in recovery, but is prescribed a lot of potent prescription medications as well. So I just like to highlight this because although we might think, oh, her goal should be to stop smoking, to stop drinking, this opens it up for, these are her goals. She wants to attend prom, but now we can have conversations about it. I can be curious about it. She can share more things and find ways to be safe. And down the line, she does have some goals and does cut back on her drinking completely. So next slide, please. This slide, nothing about us without us. I'm not sure if you guys have heard that before. And it can get real tricky when working with youth if they're in different, maybe they have an IEP team, maybe they're on juvenile probation, then there's mom or dad or caretaker. So all of these folks really might have different plans or goals for the youth. And it can be very conflicting, I feel, for the kiddo. So the youth participant is the driver, having them have a seat at the table and having them have say, have buy-in. And my job, I feel as a recovery coach, is to advocate and lift the youth's voice and just really echo like what I'm hearing that Sarah wants is, and really using those motivational interviewing techniques to bring out some real change in the youth. So next slide, please. So right now, currently Navigating is running 2 peer support groups in the Belknap County, 2 different schools. Peer support groups at schools for substance misuse and prevention offer numerous benefits. These groups provide a safe environment where students can openly explore their decisions and choices without fear of judgment. Peer feedback is incredibly valuable as it allows students to hear perspectives from others who may be going through similar experiences. This mutual support fosters a sense of community and belonging, which can be crucial for young people who might feel isolated in their struggles. Additionally, having a structured space to discuss these issues it helps in early identification and intervention, promoting healthier coping skills and reducing the risk of substance misuse. Both groups that I go to is like an open block or study hall, so it's a little less than an hour long. We always have it set up the same way. We have a check-in. It might be like rose, thorn, bud, right? What's going well, what's not going so well, and what is something they're looking forward to. Try to include some type of education, whether it's just a short reading on the effects of marijuana on a developing brain, and then leave room for feedback from peers. And we try to set a goal at the end of group. So next week we can ask our peers about how that goal is going. And just to talk about what I'm seeing in the peer support groups, I would say about half, like I said earlier, actively using, and then half are there because of family systems. But the most substances that I'm seeing is vaping, marijuana use, alcohol use, and some high-risk behaviors such as hanging out with older men or women or unprotected sex. Next slide, please. Increasing recovery capital. And so this is crucial for anybody in recovery. Here at Navigating Recovery, we use a BARC 10 to capture one's recovery capital over time. And it just goes over to see where they're feeling, how are they feeling with their connections with the outside world? How are they feeling with their education? How are they feeling with their skills, abilities, attitudes, and knowledge? Do they feel spiritually connected? And it helps us to gauge, like, you know what, maybe they're doing really well in one area and maybe they want to set some goals. It's a tool that they can look at too, like, oh man, I'm scoring really low, you know, on social supports. Maybe I can set some goals around that. And it's just a good tool to see where their recovery capital is over time and to show them, hey, look, your recovery capital is growing. Look how well you're doing. Next slide, please. So recovery systems of care and prevention. RCOs across the state have a lot of hours devoted to these common tasks. They are comprehensive approaches designed to support individuals throughout their recovery journey and prevent substance misuse before it starts. These systems integrate a range of services, including medical care, mental health support, peer support, and community resources. Prevention efforts play a crucial role by educating communities, promoting healthy lifestyles, and providing early intervention for at-risk people. By focusing on both recovery and prevention, these systems aim to reduce the incidence of substance misuse and ensure that individuals have the support they need to maintain long-term recovery and lead fulfilling lives. And then when I think of assess, the thing that came to mind was the BARC 10 and the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is a survey that is done every 2 years, I believe, to our local schools. And that's to gain current understanding about current trends and their experience with substance use, so we can start to tailor our services, supports, and prevention on what's actually happening with our youth population. Next slide, please. All right, and so this is just a fun little diagram talking about how prevention, intervention, treatment, recovery support services, or post-treatment all work together. Getting releases of information for all other agencies your participant is working with or you are referring to is crucial, and working together and providing person-centered care. When I think of prevention, I feel like prevention is recovery. There's a lot of different, you know, aspects of prevention. I think of, right, like the Family Resource Center providing parent education, or the Step Ahead program. The Step Ahead program is before DCYF is involved, and they are working with the parents to keep them right a step ahead, keeping the children safe. When I think of intervention, I think of we do homeless outreach here at Navigating to get people connected with resources, with primary care providers, provide them with essential supplies such as like water, tent, socks, stuff like that. Treatment, there are tons of treatment options, all different levels of care. And at most treatment facilities, there is a recovery support, peer support worker embedded into their program. And then post-treatment, or I think in this diagram, maybe like recovery support is your local RCO. It could be an AA meeting, volunteering, or being of service. So I just thought this was a fun little diagram to show. Next slide, please. Here's another good one to show prevention and harm reduction on as a continuum, I guess, right? So the beginning, the primary purpose of prevention, thinking of preventing the initial use or the delay of initial substance use, right? We know kids have a higher risk of getting a substance use disorder the earlier they ingest or use substances. So if they can delay the onset of the initial use, that is a win all in itself. Secondary prevention, early detection or reduction of substance use, right? Maybe those are those peer support groups. We're talking about it. They have a safe place to explore and their decisions and get feedback from peers. And then working with folks who are, you know, maybe they have been diagnosed with a substance use disorder. How are we working with them to reduce more harm, right? Or death. And so those are just the 3 levels. And I thought that would be a good diagram to show. Next slide, please. Prevention and recovery in tandem. And I made this PowerPoint and this presentation about the work that I do and the community that I work in. I feel really lucky. In the community that I work in, we have really strong partnerships and connections, and a lot of people sit on each other's boards, and we're just very well connected, I feel like. Just to name a few on this slide. I did want to talk about, you see Boldick Park, you see Good Natured Juice and Smoothie Bar, Juggernaut Fitness. I think when I think of prevention and recovery, I think of also like the importance of pro-social activities and connecting with other people, how that really plays a huge role in success in somebody's recovery journey. Pro-social activities can help prevent substance use by building social skills and improving mental health, or volunteer work. And so if you have any questions about any of these agencies or organizations, please feel free. I'm going to be leaving my email at the end. I can provide further information on that. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to brag because it is September is National Recovery Month. This is a picture of outside of our office here at Navigating Recovery. The purple flags represent the amount of people we've supported this year. And that is just like the flags go from like one side of the building to another. So that's just a little snapshot, but Navigating Recovery has helped over 2,177 people this year. National Recovery Month is celebrated in September to raise awareness of mental health and addiction and recovery, and to support those in recovery. The purpose is to celebrate recovery and educate the general public about mental health and substance use services, and that recovery is possible and that it does work. It's a time to recommit to prevention and provide resources. Next slide, please. All right, and I wanted to here at the end just show some fun events that I am lucky enough to be a part of through the Laconia Youth Alliance. Pictured here is the Christmas parade. The Laconia, the stand-up stagecoach, which is a group of Laconia middle and high school kids, helped decorate one of the floats in the Christmas parade. And next slide, please. The picture to the right with the basketball court was the chem-free after party prom event. So the high school is open all night. I think it's from like 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. the night of prom. And we get a whole bunch of volunteers to come in. There's a whole bunch of food, pizza, games. We had a magic show, a comedian, an animal show. And the purpose is, right, like you can still have fun and stay up all night. And not be around or be in high-risk situations. The picture to the left, you see all the folks standing there. And I wanted to highlight that everybody that is part of the Laconia Youth Alliance, right? There's a different sector. I represent the substance use and recovery support services sector. Gail in the white vest, she is the owner of Boldick Park. We got Officer Orton, I believe his name is. We have somebody from the Family Resource Center. Our religious sector there, I can't remember her name, I do know it. She's gonna kill me if I forgot it, but that's okay. And then we have the two middle and high school Laconia school counselors. So just showing that picture, right? Like everybody has their hands in a different youth population in different areas. And by working together, we are able to get these kids the resources and support that they need. And that's why I just think it's so important to work together and partner together. And more recently, these pictures down at the bottom was the Party in the Park youth talent show and Battle of the Bands. Just having a fun time with the kids and yeah. Next slide, please. I think that's it. So if you have any questions, my contact information is here. I can put it in the chat as well. You can reach out to me directly if you have any questions or would like to connect outside of here or any additional resources. It is extremely important to me that we all work together, as prevention and recovery supports really do go hand in hand. So thank you for your time, guys.
Thanks, Erica. We do have a chat question for you, and it's from Angela Jerlink, and she wanted to know, how would a student know you offer the group at their school? Does it need to be an internal member that refers them? Sorry if I missed the referral process.
You did not miss it, and I was gonna go over that, so that's a great question. So I think each school does it a little bit different. I think some school staff or counselors might identify some high-risk students. And I believe one of the schools, they send out an email to the school emails to all the students, so they are able to join. But I think if they went to their school counselor and asked if they could join. I don't know if there's like, I don't think there's like a sign on the door or an announcement over the intercom. The school cannot force a child to be a part of this. They can highly suggest that a child be a part of this. And it is open for anybody at the school. So it's not just open for one and not the other. So I would ask the student to talk to their school counselor, and I'm just starting school groups back up again. So I'm going to talk with them and ask them more questions like, how are we getting this out? How are the students knowing, to make sure that everybody has the opportunity, if they want to be a part of that group.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Erica? So Erica, in the chat, Heidi mentioned what a beautiful illustration of the importance of prevention across the continuum of care within prevention and recovery. It's so validating to hear the great work you are doing and how nicely it aligns with what we are doing at IOD. So we'll be hearing from Heidi in a few minutes, and we have some sentiments of a great presentation, Erica. So do we have any other questions or anything that we wanted to ask Erica? Great, seeing none. Guess we can, oh, there'll be a Q&A time at the end. Yes, Kimberly, thank you. Danny, I think we can move forward then.
Super. Thanks so much. I really can't say enough, Erica, how great it was to hear first from a Building Futures Together graduate, which is one of our initiatives at the Institute on Disability, but also just how you have integrated everything, within the Building Futures Together curriculum into your work, and how nicely it aligns. So thank you. It's great. And hopefully my presentation is not going to be completely redundant of everything that Erica said, but will be reinforcing. So lots of consistencies, around data tools, partnering at the Institute on Disability. One of our mottos is nothing about us without us. And we pride ourselves really in partnering with individuals from the community to really design supports and ways for moving forward and through challenges. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about the importance of really prevention and recovery efforts, and how we support young people. So our group at the Institute on Disability, the Children's Behavioral Health team at the Institute on Disability, looks at utilizing evidence-based practices with youth between the ages of 12 to 25. And so I'm excited to talk with you about students in particular that may be experiencing challenges related to mental health and substance use challenges, and encourage you, before we kind of dive in and get started, to just silently reflect on your thoughts about the intersection between prevention and recovery and wellness and overall health and well-being. And so I know that I am preaching to the choir, but I always usually start with a little bit of information about substance use specifically in New Hampshire. So according to the national survey, next slide, please, on drug use and health, New Hampshire ranks in the top 15 for the use of cocaine. Can you advance the slides, please? Thank you. Thank you. So you'll see the orange is overall statistics in the United States, and then the dark blue there is New Hampshire. And you can see that New Hampshire ranks among the top 15 for use of cocaine binge drinking, which is defined as 5 or more alcoholic drinks for males and 4 more for females on the same occasion. The use of marijuana and illicit drug use for individuals 12 and over. Next slide, please. And among New Hampshire, so this is UNH specific data where I work. Among UNH students, alcohol was close to double cannabis use. And then we're seeing nicotine, tobacco, stimulants, and hallucinogens, and kind of a study drugs, right, being the most widely used on the UNH campuses and across colleges. That's consistent with national statistics. I will say that some recent studies over the past year that have come out are showing that cannabis is really creeping up there, getting neck and neck on certain campuses with alcohol use. And so we know with our youth and young adult populations that this is a real challenge. Next slide, please. And we know also that more than 140,000 people die each year from alcohol-related causes, making alcohol the 4th leading preventable cause of death. And unlike drug overdose deaths, the rate of alcohol overdose deaths has steadily increased over the past 4 years. And I know that these are kind of startling statistics, but it also, I think, demonstrates a great opportunity for us to really provide some good education and prevention resources. And so, you know, I always say whenever we're doing anything at UNH that my goal is to ensure that we have 0 bystander incidents, right? And so we want to make sure that every student on the UNH campus, you know, that all the parents, everyone in our community understands the Good Samaritan law, they understand the risks of alcohol and other drugs, and can really make informed choices about that. Next slide, please. So, and I'm going to, talk a little bit about recovery, but I'll kind of move quickly through that because I think Erica did a beautiful job kind of talking about recovery in general. But substance use is really one of the few chronic medical disorders where we offer 30-day graduation certificates with virtually no follow-up, right? It's one of the most stigmatized and isolating illnesses, and individuals with other chronic diseases get community support, right? We see outpourings of meal trains and social and emotional support and ongoing support. I have several loved ones, you know, who have had cancer and they get regular follow-ups and care. And that isn't always the case with substance use and mental health challenges. And so, you know, we really want to make sure that individuals are not ostracized in their communities and that they're really getting the ongoing social and recovery supports that are needed to maintain recovery and overall health and wellness. And we always focus on health and wellness. And that's because regardless of whether we're talking about substance use or eating disorders or workaholism, right? You know, there are some commonalities among how folks kind of cope and try to dull their feelings. And so one of the goals within both the alternative peer groups and the collegiate recovery programs that I'm going to talk about is promoting overall health and wellness and really looking at a holistic version of you know, what creates a meaningful, productive life, and how do we process hard things, and how do we address equity? Because I think equity is an underlying issue for a lot of these things. Next slide, please. So as Erica was illustrating, as I said, she did a nice job of talking about recovery, so I'm going to move kind of quickly through this. SAMHSA has a beautiful working definition of recovery that defines recovery as a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live self-directed lives, and strive to reach their full potential. Next slide, please. And we know that recovery is really individualized and intentional process that involves sustained efforts to improve wellness and requires support and relationships with others. And particularly with adolescents, and kind of how I came to substance use is I have been working with youth and families, kind of at-risk youth and families as they were defined early in my career, for over 25 years. And when I had youth that either were struggling with substance use themselves or family members, they would feel just completely isolated. If they wanted to get any kind of support or distance themselves from drug and alcohol, they really felt that they had to drop their peer group. And again, as Erica said, the social component of using was really huge. And so we really need to look at a holistic recovery approach that emphasizes not just overall health and wellness and focusing on the individual's strengths and talents and resources, but also how do we help connect them to community, right? And create communities that are supportive. Connection, belonging, family, and community are essential. And here, support kind of grounds itself in mutual support and understanding, reducing vulnerability and strengthening recovery capital. Next slide, please. We know that recovery is possible, and I'd love for you to add to the chat, what are, how do you think that prevention efforts can support those in recovery? Would love to hear your ideas. We'll give you just a minute to flood the chat with your thoughts. And while you're thinking, we'll move forward to the next slide, please. Nice. Listen non-judgmentally. Feel free to keep adding any prevention efforts to support those in recovery into the chat. Supporting parents to talk to youth about prevention while they're in recovery. Great. Yeah, we think about prevention, and again, Erica did a beautiful job talking about prevention on a continuum, right? Thinking about what do we do for all, what do we do for those at risk, and then what do we do for those that are already using or in recovery? Normalize the struggle, break down stigma, and use non-judgmental language. Great. I feel like I missed one of the, I'm gonna try to scroll up. Good. Yeah, so keep adding those to the chat. I'm going to move on. But I would love to see, more of your thoughts as we go through. Parental recovery is prevention. Love that. Encourage teens to see a whole picture, not focus on just anger and judgment at parents who are struggling. Yeah. That's great. And we talk about recovery as being very much a family process, right? That it doesn't happen in isolation. So that's really important as well. So, all right, can we move forward to the next slide? We want to, make sure that we're really grounding in resilience being a key component of recovery, and that prevention efforts include as I said, the whole population, individuals at higher risk for developing substance use dependence, as well as those that are using substances or in recovery. And that we're collaborating with those impacted and really doing intentional outreach and recruitment to diverse communities. As again, Erica's statistics showed, right? Many of our marginalized youth in particular, so youth in the LGBTQ plus community, New Americans, other diverse youth, are feeling isolated or dealing with additional life stressors that may lead them to turn to alcohol or other drugs as a coping strategy. And so we know that prevention efforts can include family and caregiver engagement and support, bystander harm reduction and other educational efforts, allyship training. And that really helps to really destigmatize and normalize getting help, but also teach folks, better language and where to find supports. Because the other thing that we hear from individuals all the time is that they don't know where and how to access supports. And so the more we educate everyone, the better we're going to be equipped to address that. And recurrence prevention is also an important prevention activity, and intentionally building recovery capital. So next slide, please. Our vision is that all youth and young adults can flourish among challenges. We all experience challenges every day, and again, we want to learn to access and connect to resources that can help to create a community of support and bolster recovery efforts. Next slide. So I'm going to talk specifically about the alternative peer group model and how we're using that with youth and young adults. And so in 2016, the Institute on Disability collaborated with the Bureau of Behavioral Health, treatment providers, individuals impacted by substance use, and we received a Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration grant to do an environmental scan and gap analysis, and to make some recommendations for evidence-based practices that we could bring to New Hampshire specifically to serve youth with substance use challenges. Next slide, please. And so we did some focus groups and, really looked at what we had available here in New Hampshire. And what we found is really consistent with, again, some national data. And so you'll see at the top here, individuals 12 and over receiving substance use treatment and supports were most likely to seek out self-help groups and mutual aid groups. And over again in our focus groups, in interviews, we heard from youth and families that what was most beneficial to them in their recovery journey and recovery was peer and family support. Next slide, please. And so that led us to do some research on what are some evidence-based or promising practices specifically around peer support with youth. And we came across the alternative peer group model. And as we dove into that model, and the alternative peer group model has actually been around since, I don't know, it's like 40 years old, I think, and kind of started in the southern part of the country. And there are a number of alternative peer groups along the West Coast as well. But we found that a lot of the alternative peer groups that were operating didn't have clearly defined models or were grounded in an abstinence-only and 12-step approach. And we were hearing from youth and families here in New Hampshire, particularly from marginalized communities, that that approach didn't resonate with them. And so we convened our partners to really clearly define the New Hampshire alternative peer group model. And so next slide, please. And looked at embedding peer support across a continuum of care. So when we're thinking about a continuum of care, we're talking about, youth quickly being identified and referred to supports and services, and having multiple entry points to access supports and services, quickly doing assessments and connecting them to appropriate levels of care, and embedding recovery supports or peer supports across that continuum of care. Next slide, please. And I'm going to focus solely really on the alternative peer group model. This model utilizes trained adults with lived experience. You know, we ask organizations to try to identify individuals that are relatable to young people, that have their own lived experience. We provide certified recovery support worker training to them, as well as some other what we consider essential trainings that our kind of partner group had identified, that are grounded in cultural and linguistically appropriate service standards. And you know, they receive naloxone training and CPR training and things like that. But then, so the group facilitators are kind of taking on a facilitator role, but also mentoring youth based on their lived experience, and they're trained as well in strategic sharing. But then they're fostering peer support among group members as well, so that the youth can connect with other peers that understand what they're going through. And so they have regular recovery supports, but then they also have social opportunities where they can connect and let off steam, right? And family support is another essential part of that. And then, you know, part of the healing process for youth and families is having opportunities to connect together. And so providing those social opportunities for youth and families to grow their recovery capital together and interact is also important. And so they might, you know, have a football game watching party, you know, like a Patriots watch party this time of year, or they might go to a fall festival together, or make scarecrows, you know, or they do like a Friendsgiving, and encourage participants to share their cultural traditions and how they can celebrate and connect together. And you can actually advance 2 slides, because I just talked about the next slide as well. Sorry, I'm not great about that. And so there are currently 7 organizations that are implementing 13 alternative peer groups across the state, if we include collegiate recovery as well. And collegiate recovery is looking at just utilizing that alternative peer group model with college age students. Next slide, please. And actually, we're gonna go right up to the video. Yeah, thanks. And so we launched the Wildcats for Recovery group last August in 2023. And we have a quick little video kind of talking about recovery supports for students at the UNH campus that I'm going to show you.
This group exists for students. It's a space where folks can really just come in and be accepted and welcomed as they are.
Wildcats for Recovery takes a harm reduction approach. It is a peer group where we have a safe space for students to share openly and honestly with each other.
Nationwide, this is a very new movement of having a recovery or substance-free space.
College is just riddled with a lot of substance use. So I felt the connection in the peer group. If you are struggling, then there's a lot of people there who can share their experiences. Each person's journey with substance use is different. There's no linear path.
There's so much stigma still to substance use. You feel alone when you feel like you can't tell anybody anything, you can't talk about your story. And when you have that outlet, it's such a big difference. Being around a group of people that represent what you believe in is super important. And it's just a helpful way to like feel a part of something.
You know, we might be labeled as Wildcats for Recovery, but you don't necessarily need to have to like identify as being in recovery to join the group. It also can be a lot less daunting than going to some more formal things like a counselor or therapist.
Peer-based recovery is much more approachable for people. It is just people talking, hanging out, there's hot food, there's snacks, and no one's trying to diagnose you, no one is trying to treat you.
One of the wonderful pieces of Wildcats for Recovery is it sort of supports social wellness while somebody is making changes.
So this is the Thrive room. Really want to make the space feel as comfortable as possible. There's a yoga room. We have space to do things like arts and crafts, cookie baking in the kitchen. There's also opportunities to go hiking and have various field trips off campus.
We also offer a variety of other supports, structures, events. We provide allyship training, which is kind of just a way for people to have a more modern and informed understanding of what substance use or substance misuse and addiction is, so they can be more supportive to the people in their lives. You don't have to be directly affected to still care and see it as an issue. And it's that kind of movement, that kind of involvement from people that are not only inside of that group that helps to normalize and create the change that we want to see.
Knowing that there are folks here that can help navigate and sift through all that the community and the school has to offer and connect folks with what it is that they need is, I think, a really unique part of this space, because this is really a space for folks to reflect and find out like what's best for them.
So Erica had said that about 50% of youth that they're engaged with in Laconia report getting involved because of family use and not their own. And that's consistent with what we're seeing on the college campus as well. And so, you know, we're training students to provide weekly recovery supports. I know, right? We ask students, so the comment in the chat was, I love the inclusion of snacks on every flyer. So every time we do any education or outreach or like weekly groups, we ask students like, what would you like to see? And they're always like, more snacks. And so, which is, you know, funny because, you know, a lot of our budgets can't pay for food. So it's ironic. But we're really fortunate that we received some funding from the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services to pilot the collegiate recovery using the alternative peer group model last fall. And have been able and received additional funding this year to scale up to other university system of New Hampshire institutions, and we're collaborating with the local recovery community organizations in Manchester, Plymouth, and Concord to be able to do that. And so tomorrow is University Day at UNH Manchester, and Revive Recovery will be there. Handing out snacks and harm reduction education, information and materials, and asking students if they're interested in connecting to some recovery supports. And so the students are trained, go through the same alternative peer group training that we provide to folks that are operating alternative peer groups with the under 18 crowd. So certified recovery support worker training. We're also putting some of those facilitators through smart recovery training this year as well. And last week in our group at UNH, Erica, they were talking about wellness recovery action plans. So I saw lots of parallels in what we're doing, which was great. And so we're making sure that we're providing outreach and education opportunities, again, so that students understand the amnesty policy at the university, as well as the Good Samaritan law that protects them from seeking help for them or themselves, or I'm sorry, for themselves or others due to an alcohol or other drug emergency. We're making sure that students understand what a drug and alcohol emergency might look like, that they're getting education about how their body metabolizes different drugs and the dangers of different drugs without preaching, and really utilizing a motivational interviewing approach so that students can reflect on the choices that they make. And if they choose, to reduce their use or are seeking recovery supports. And we, already this year, we've had probably half a dozen students reach out and say that they were specifically looking for recovery supports at UNH. And so that's really promising. And every time we do an outreach event, we have faculty and staff that say, I'm in recovery, and this was so needed when I was in school, and how can I help? And so we also have recovery stickers, and part of our recovery ally training, we encourage faculty and staff and students to put recovery speaks or recovery spoken here stickers on their water bottles or their laptops or their faculty offices, to indicate folks that are safe to talk to about alcohol or other drugs or recovery supports. Next slide, please. One thing I think that has been really instrumental in Wildcats for Recovery getting some traction on the Durham campus is the collaboration across several departments within the UNH environment. And again, specific outreach to some of those marginalized communities. So working directly with military and veteran affairs, with the Office of Civil Rights and Equity, with student life, specific outreach. We were fortunate at UNH that we do have substance-free housing. And so a lot of our students that choose not to use alcohol or drugs or are in recovery choose to live there. And then I talked about a lot of the other things. But just this year so far, we had over 100 families engage in a caregiver meet and greet this fall during move-in weekend, where students and their parents came and got harm reduction education. And that was really great, and learned about Wildcats for Recovery. We had an ice cream social during the first week of school where over 300 students attended. And we are participating in a lot of the recovery rallies around the state over the next couple of weeks. So you might see me in a community near you. Next slide, please. And so really wanted to kind of frame this conversation, around how can we better collaborate? Erica's doing fabulous work in Laconia. I have heard of some of that work, but too often we are operating in silos, right? And we really need to create a more integrated system of care. Work really strategically and intentionally around coordinating prevention, harm reduction, and recovery efforts. And so that's kind of my hope that you'll take away from this presentation today. Next slide, please. And so, as I said earlier, that means ensuring that all of our New Hampshire residents have access to what I like to call social influencers instead of social determinants of health, right? That we know that equitable access to high quality education, healthcare, safe neighborhoods, and environments that really foster community, economic stability, and social, I always say it takes a village, right? Having those social and recreational resources support one's ability to find and maintain recovery. And so, next slide, please. Would like to really ensure that we are improving overall wellness of all of our residents, but particularly, youth and families. The New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Education and we've been working collaboratively with them at the Institute on Disability to really intentionally create a children's system of care. So that we are focusing on the overall well-being of children and families, and that is just makes really good sense for to create environments and conditions where youth and families can flourish, but also minimizing costs to the state, social costs, costs of incarceration, cost of hospitalizations, and for recovery supports, we don't have a ton of this is kind of showing the continuum of care, different levels of care across the continuum, from assessment, screening, and treatment, all the way to acute inpatient care, right? And we don't have a lot of that inpatient care, and we know that that can also be traumatizing for youth and families. And so when we have to send kids out of state, or anybody out of state, right? That it creates more harm. And so we really want to back up, and we want to provide community-based, culturally responsive care that's accessible to youth and families whenever possible. And so my hope is really that we can start to better integrate everything that we're doing to really create a more comprehensive system of care. Next slide, please. Also want to point out that it is Recovery Month. So a couple of tips on here to promote recovery. You can also check out SAMHSA's recovery toolkit, and I'm happy to put that in the chat for folks as well. I encourage you to post that out. The more we can provide information about recovery supports, the more we can break down the stigma and increase access to supports. And I welcome your questions. So what questions do you have for me? And you can advance to the next slide too.
Heidi, thank you so much for that presentation. You did a great job. I remember when collegial recovery was like a mustard seed 10 years ago. So how far you've brought, you and your colleagues have brought UNH forward is amazing. My question is, will we ever see the higher education survey on AOD be administered again?
Oh, such a great question. Such a great question. So the I don't have a great answer. I'm not sure that I can answer that at this point.
Okay.
UNH is not administering that at this point in time. However, we do have a relatively new alcohol, nicotine, and other drug coalition that formed last year that is bringing harm reduction materials to campus and is really looking more intentionally and strategically about aligning supports and services, and recognizes that that data is really critical to have in order to build out supports. As you know, many colleges and universities are also experiencing budget concerns as kind of post-COVID, a lot of we're seeing decline enrollment in colleges and universities across the nation. And so just trying to be strategic and intentional with staff resources that we do have. But one really positive thing is that students do have access to Narcan and fentanyl test strips, and we've really been making great strides to provide education and information to the entire university community about how to access those. So that I think is really positive.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Is there collaboration between any APG and juvenile diversion program in New Hampshire? Great question. Thank you, Jennifer. And I actually meant to talk about that, but of course, then I didn't, always look at my notes. So one, I mentioned in my bio that I'm a multi-tiered system of support trainer. For those of you that are not familiar with MTSS or multi-tiered systems of support, it's really applying a public health framework to how supports and interventions are provided within a school system. And so looking at, what do we do for all students to ensure success? How do we provide supports to at-risk students? And then how do we provide individualized intensive supports to that small percentage of students that need it? And so have worked closely with some of the organizations that are implementing the alternative peer groups and the local school districts to provide alternative to suspensions, the alternative peer groups, as an alternative to suspension. We have talked about court diversion or juvenile diversion. But we also want to have a commitment to ensuring that these supports are voluntary. And so, providing information about the resources, but not necessarily requiring that young people participate in them. One of the nice things that we did see, though, from the alternatives to suspension data is we had a huge number of students. I want to say it's like 76%, but I'll have to go back and look at the data. So there were, when students participated in an alternative peer group as an alternative to suspension, the youth could choose to, most schools do like 3 or 5 days of out of school suspension, or they could choose to go to, say, 5 sessions of an alternative peer group. Every school, and like depending on the offense, what the drug or alcohol related incident happened, would kind of dictate the number of days that the school would suggest for a suspension. And so we saw a number of students drop off after those kind of required sessions, but then 3 or 4 or 5 weeks later, they would come back on a voluntary basis. And so overall, by the end of the school year, I think it was around 76% of students that were referred through an alternative to suspension program voluntarily chose to reconnect or stay connected to the APG. So how much is stigma still a factor for folks seeking recovery? And do you see it equally across the lifespan, or is stigma more prevalent in certain age groups? I'm happy to speak to what we hear from the youth and young adults. The stigma is real. I had a student last year say to me, I'm probably going to misquote them, but I just thought it was so great. They were like, in this day and age, my peer group understands the importance of using pronouns and creating, and having gender neutral bathrooms and creating affirming spaces. And then, 8 o'clock will hit and we'll go out and I'll be harassed for not drinking. Right? And it's like, why can't we be allies to everyone at the same time? Right? And so there's a lot of peer pressure We always remind students that that there's a lot of false perception about everyone is using, right? If we look at the data, we know that not everyone is using, or that a majority of students are using to minimize harm. And so that's an important evidence-based practice to emphasize, I think. But the stigma is real, and I said, early on that I've worked with at-risk youth or vulnerable families for over 25 years. And one of the things that I've always heard from youth is that they would start getting in trouble, and they would get more positive peer status, right? And so, it was, so not using alcohol or drugs was seen as really penalizing. And I'll be quiet and let Erica answer.
I agree with all of what you said, Heidi. I think, as you mentioned earlier, using and drinking for the youth age population is a way of social connectedness, and that's their way. And so not drinking alcohol at the party can be viewed as weird. But I think stigma is alive and well in all aspects of the lifespan, just in different ways, right? And when I'm looking at working with families and moms in recovery that might have had a reoccurrence, like the stigma to get help with fear of consequences, fear of losing your children. And so sometimes it's a lot harder for them to ask for help, fear of consequences, I think, or feel of failure or being looked at. And so stigma is alive and well in all aspects everywhere. And I'm not sure if that will ever go away. I am on a lived experience panel for folks who access healthcare settings such as hospitals or emergency rooms, and the stigma they face from even healthcare professionals and doctors and nurses, and how they were treated so awful at an ER where they went to for help. And it all boils down to just being kind. And I just still don't know how we haven't figured that out yet. And we're still working at it.
It's so well said, Erica. I didn't say this during my bio. I'm not a person in recovery from substances myself, but I do have some family members with substance use dependence, and as a result have been a teetotaler most of my life. And across my lifespan, I can say I have experienced the stigma, and no matter where I am, right? Like, I love high adventure, rock climbing, mountain biking. Inevitably at the end of any event, somebody will be, let's grab a beer. Where's the closest pub? Right? And so, I think another important piece of the prevention and harm reduction and recovery connection is really just being more mindful and aware of, are our spaces recovery friendly or recovery hostile, right? And what are the messages that we are sharing on a daily basis, whether intentionally or unintentionally? Other questions or comments? I actually think I'm probably at the end of my time. Oh, and I was going to pop the SAMHSA recovery toolkit in the chat. I will find that and post it.
Well, folks, this is Kim Wade over with BDAS. We did also create a resource list that Danny's gonna put into the chat, and we can also make available when they post the recording of this this presentation. And what it has is, for those of you that are not as familiar with recovery, it has recovery resources on a national level, recovery resources throughout our state, and then it also has multiple calendars of recovery events for this month. So we have one that was made from the Department of Health and Human Services, but there's also one that was made from the New Hampshire Recovery Hub. And if you guys want to go to that, they have a lot of great stuff of information in there. And then there's also Recovery Friendly Workplace that had created a list. So there's multiple ways that you could support recovery by attending these different educational or just supportive events. And then you can also go to the UNH website. We included within this document 2 UNH things. One's opioid prevention project that they have, and the other one is the naloxone training. And the naloxone training is a virtual training that you take online, and then you get naloxone or Narcan, which is the name that is also used, mailed right to your house just for going through the training. And you can also get that training brought to your organization. So in another way to promote prevention, having Narcan on you to help save a life, because you never know when you might need it, is always great to have on hand. Jennifer? We can't hear you, Jennifer. I'm sorry, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. No, I just wanted to make a comment on some of the other comments and reinforce like today's COP there. It's my husband is in recovery, and so we're a recovery family with a young child. And my husband's journey of learning life skills and coping mechanisms and all that is working out great for our son, because he's learning those really early, and that's the prevention, and we talk openly and honestly about it. But it's also why I got into this, this area too, so to hopefully, spread that word. But I just wanted, there's like a ripple effect between recovery and prevention, and I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'll also say from my own experience too, Jennifer, I have family members that have recovery journey, but I don't. But being in this field and knowing how language matters, I talk in front of my children, and now that they're getting older, they actually catch themselves from using the term that they hear so much in television, and then correct themselves because they've heard me say it so much that they know as they're getting ready to say it, no, that doesn't sound right. I know that's not how I'm supposed to say that. And they take a pause. So your children really do listen to you, even when you think they're not listening to you. So, the more we can role model the compassion and the treatment we want other people to have, the more it's going to be ingrained in each coming generation. And before we know it, our grandchildren will just be, this will just be part of their normal lexicon of how they speak. So.
Kimberly, we have Marissa Carlson, and then we just need to talk about the eval.
All right, go for it.
Marissa was just saying about the SAPS training that's happening in October, 4-day foundational training and prevention theory using SPIF, especially geared for folks who've been working prevention for 6 months to 5 years. She put a link. The other bad news is that the resource list that you created wouldn't let us upload as a document to the chat. So Danny's going to email it to me. I'm going to Facebook it, because that way people will have to go to our new Facebook page. But I'll also put it with we'll put it with the other materials from today. So because it was a phenomenal resource list. So great job, Maura.
Yeah, I just also wanted to let everyone know that our Leaders in Prevention weekend retreat for middle school students is registering for January, February, and March. All the information is easily found on our website at the New Hampshire Teen Institute. So if you work with middle school students, or if you have a middle school student, check it out. If you have any questions, you can email me. All of our information is easily found on the website.
Okay, thanks, Maura. Thank you for having your hand up. I just put in the chat where we did put in the evaluation link, and it's something different this month. We just submitted, literally as we were going through the meeting today, our application for the New Hampshire Prevention Certification Board to get permanent CEUs attached to the community of practice for prevention. I did CC some of our BDAS colleagues, and we are grateful for both Heidi as well as Erica submitting your CV and resume, because that's part of the the process so that everybody can get CEUs for attending the COPs. That's an awful lot of acronyms. So community of practice and continuing education units. I want to thank everybody who came out today. There was, I think, one thing that I didn't see on the list. SOS Recovery has their rally Saturday the 14th, and that will be in Dover. So we'll have that, and we have about 20 other different recovery events, because there's, I think, 19 RCOs, so about 19 different different recovery events. So September is an exciting time. I'm so grateful to our speakers, and I definitely want to thank the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services for helping to fund these COPs, and I want everybody to hopefully have left here feeling like they have a better understanding of recovery supports in our state. Kimberly, did you have anything else that you needed to add?
No, just a thank you to everybody attending and for our speakers. And we really hope that if you're not already connected with your RCOs or the recovery programs in your area, that you reach out, because it's a great partnership and it's a great way to support each other.
Okay, everybody. Well, thank you. We're going to end on time, and I want everybody to have a great week. Heidi, thank you. And Erica, thank you for your time. Bye, ladies.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Danny.